Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. Sitting here with a rather wonderful Mr. Christian Kohler. How are you?
I'm good. Wie geht es dir, mein Freund?
Good. Well, Nick, no, good.
Good,
But,
alles gut.
aber sehr beschäftigt.
Sehr beschäftigt.
As
Not
usual.
not bad. Yeah, we're both very busy.
Very busy.
What are we going to do today?
Well, you're going to join us on our frequently asked questions, otherwise known as FAQ Friday. For FAQ's sake. All right, we're big, we're bad, we're back. I'm in black, as usual. You're the metal guy. Shouldn't you be dressed in black?
Yeah, I just wanted to create a little contrast, to make, otherwise things get just too evil.
Compare and contrast. Okay, so there's some good questions here.
Okay. They're coming from your audience? Or
they get left under, which means please leave any of your questions below under here. And Eric, who's sitting over there, will scour them and pick up some good ones.
All right.
So these are ones that I think are right up your Strasse, as it were.
Yeah.
That's my version of right up your alley. Okay. That was my attempt. So this question, it's a little wordy, but what they're trying to ask is like, when using things like MIDI drums, what tricks or tips have you done to make them feel a little bit more natural? And not necessarily with the velocities, because that's obviously one thing.
Yeah.
But like, how do you make it feel like it's in a space? It's not just, dry MIDI samples.
Oh, okay. I mean, first of all, you got to use a good library, of course.
Yeah.
That includes overhead and room samples. That helps a lot because room samples just make it sound more natural. One thing I recently did on both pre-recorded drums that were recorded like, I don't know, pretty much a home studio somewhere.
Yeah.
But also with programmed drums is what I call re-rooming. So I play them back with a big studio speaker actually, but you can also use a PA system or something.
Right.
And I play them back through my live room and re-record those tracks. So I fake room mics or something. And that's something you can do even if you don't have a big studio room, you can just take your laptop and a speaker and a pair of mics to any room that might be available somewhere after the recording. So you don't need to have a big live room and add some natural reverb. And I think that is something that makes, samples also more unique, because nobody else has that room sound. It's just your room and it's fun. So try that. Use a PA speaker, play back your drums, the dry drums, maybe a mix of the drums or just the snare or just the toms, doesn't really matter, in a nice sounding room and put some mics somewhere and play with those tracks.
That's good. I've done those kinds of things myself. The one thing I think you touched on there is if you use your own room, you'll get a better idea of how to make it sound. Because I did it in my old studio with a PA in the middle of the room and then mic'd it as though it was my usual room mics. And it completely helped me make these drums sound better because then suddenly I had an ambience that sounded like my room and it became familiar and I started mixing it and I got a drum sound I was happy with.
I know what you mean. And another cool thing is sometimes, even if you have a great sounding live room, sometimes you may just want to have a lot of room information on the snare and not on the cymbals.
Right.
So if you crank the real room mics, it might just sound too splashy with all the cymbals. Sure. You just want to have the snare with a big So just play back the snare through that room. Yeah. And a lot of fun. Yeah,
we did that with the exact same thing with the PA in like a room on Aerosmith and only put the kick and snare through.
Yeah, right.
It was just
exactly
a lot of fun in a warehouse.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Just find whatever stairway or something. Doesn't have to be a professional room or something.
Actually, it doesn't even have to be big.
No,
because it can be very echoey. I mean, a tiled bathroom.
Yeah, and you have the time to try stuff like weird mic combinations or positions and stuff.
Yep.
That's fun.
Okay, so this one I think is an absolutely incredible question.
Which one?
And it is, I'd love to hear what you think constitutes a rough mix. Does it include just basic high passing, panning and leveling, or can it include compression, reverb, delay, bussing and automation?
It can include everything or nothing. There is no definition of a rough mix. What might be a rough mix to me might be something different to you. One thing I never do is if clients ask me for rough mixes, or they tell me like we want to hear like you don't have to mix the entire song, just do a rough mix or something. I say that no, either I mix the whole thing, that's my idea, and I put that work into it, or not, because everything else is not my mix. That's just a compromise. But a rough mix like can be used. Let's say, if you want like. For the band, the club, if you want to send the singer something to, rehearse the vocals or something like that, I always try to make sure that the message of the song is already there, that you understand, the message, the meaning, the emotions behind it. And technically it needs a little more work, but you get the idea. I don't want to send anything out, not even to the singer of the band, that doesn't show the message of the song. Yeah, so if that means you need to put some work into it, put some work into it. That's how I would define a good rough mix.
That's a good answer. I'm going to just take this one stage further, because my experience has been people send me mixes that they call rough mixes. And you can tell they've spent half a day or a day mixing it, and it's got tons of detail on automation and panning. It can be
a good excuse. It's just a rough mix.
Yeah,
I've done that as well. So it's like that's just very rough, very rough.
Very rough. Yeah. This mix that I've been working on for 4 days. It's just a rough mix.
Exactly.
Jim Scott said to me, he's like he doesn't do rough mixes. He either does a mix or he doesn't do a mix. And so he tends to do, and this is something I sort of subscribe to, is like board mixes. Now, obviously, if you're in a DAW, you can still be the same thing. Just like, it's the end of the night. Like Mark Endett will send me mixes, and it's called EOD, end of day. And he'll just send me where he's at the end, so I can just get a little idea of what he's doing, and maybe have some comments.
Printing, whatever, like before you switch off.
Just printing where it is. And Jim always talked about that, because he's like, whatever you worked on last is going to be the loudest thing. Just cut vocals.
Yeah, that's right.
Vocals are going to be up here in the band.
But everybody knows you record vocals, Steve. You come back the other day, go like, oh, okay, or whatever it is. The bass, it will always be too loud. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a tough one with the rough mixes.
Just don't do rough mixes. You can call them rough mixes.
Yeah.
But better do that. Same thing here. Either I mix or I don't mix.
Yeah.
At least if I give something out, if you're working on a project, okay, but if you send something to we
were talking about this earlier. Back when we were kids, a rough mix came on a cassette. Maybe a printed CD.
Later,
Either way, it wasn't something that went into an email. Because once it's in an email, it can get forwarded all over the world, an MP3. That used to be you could have control of the cassette in your car, and like, the only other person would hear it would be your passenger. Or even a CD, people didn't have, at least when I first started, didn't have a way of burning CDs. No. They got it from the studio, and that was it. So that's the only reason why I was a little wary on rough mixes, because if I send something in an email, it can get misconstrued.
Might go anywhere, right?
Go somewhere, and suddenly somebody's like, "Whoa, Warren doesn't know how to mix.
Right?
Bass is too loud." It's like, because it was the last thing we tracked. Yeah, very tough one. So yes, your question about what you should do is, if it's really a rough mix, you don't have to worry about those things. Like Christian said, it's just conveying the idea. But be careful. People don't listen to mixes as though they're rough mixes. When capturing guitar with a 57-121 combination, obviously Shure SM57 and a Royer 121 combo, are those being summed to one mono guitar track or being panned wide left and wide right?
I do metal. We always sum them to mono. Then you have 2 takes, so you play again. And then you have 1 take on one side, the other take on the other side, both sides with both microphones. That's what most of the time, I don't even record. Even if I use several microphones, I mix them together and print them to one track directly.
Oh, you do always?
Always. Most 90% of the time. Just make my decision. When I feel comfortable with the tone, I just commit. And that's it. Because I don't want to mess around with too much stuff. There are so many, when you start mixing, there are so many tracks that need some work. Why don't you, just get a good guitar tone right from the start, and just make sure the phase is right.
That's the bit, making sure the phase is right.
Right. So I spend a lot of time like blending microphones, checking the phase, slightly delaying them. Yeah. But I know what I'm doing, and then I prefer just having like one good sounding track instead of 4 different mics, and then maybe you double that guitar and double that guitar, and you end up with a million tracks, and it's just confusing. No, keep it simple.
Right.
That's how I do it. Yeah, and always to mono. I mean, you can pan that, but that doesn't make it stereo because it's still the same take. For experiments, that can work, right? But usually guitar is mono, no matter how many microphones you use.
You bring up an interesting point, because I think committing is super important. We always talk about that. But the other thing is, I remember I was working with Dave Sardi, and it was Towers of London. We were mixing Towers. You remember that band? They were like a rock, metal-y punk band. It's like maybe 15 years ago, British band. Mm-hmm. Very like Stooges kind of rock, And I don't know who had recorded it, but they had like a left-hand guitar and a right-hand guitar, and each one had 4 or 5 mics on it. So it was like a 57, 121, some large diaphragm condenser, and maybe a mic pulled back with a little bit of room. And they had printed them all separately. Mm-hmm. And because they hadn't committed, it was like, what sound are you trying to get?
Yeah, right.
And Dave's just said to me, Sardi said to me, he's like, listen to them all and just choose the one that sounds the best.
Yeah, right.
So I ended up listening, mute.
So even the best guys in the business, and I also prefer, just send me a great track.
Yeah.
I don't need too many options. Or you can give me options, but it's just better to send me, instead of 5 kick mics, send me one that is great. Like, so I can move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
I couldn't get a combination that sounded perfectly in phase.
Good example is most of the time when I get keyboard tracks, some metal bands, have like orchestra or synths or whatever. I usually tell them like to make it as simple as possible. And if I have problems, I can get back to you. But I don't need 50 horn tracks and 70 string tracks. That takes me more time to find out what they're doing. Make a rough mix or make a horn section, a string section. That's what I want. Like some stems. Yeah. And in case something goes wrong, I can still get back to you and ask for the other tracks. But I don't want to go through 150.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Aren't modeling amps better than real amps? Because you can always make changes and always have a seemingly perfect recording environment. You always have access to the clean signal. How long do you think real amps will be used in professional systems?
Oh my God. It should be a separate video. So
his blood is boiling.
So much. Where do I start?
Veins are standing pouring up on his head.
Let me start here. You are right about like amp sims being more practical, being more convenient, being more like handy, easy to use. And yes, if you don't have access to a room, to cabs, microphones, tube amps, all that stuff you need to record great sounding guitar tracks, that might just be better. And of course, you can switch between presets. It's all so convenient. But I sometimes compare this to like McDonald's versus real cooking. If I have the time, which is most of the time, I still use my tube amps, my analog gear, real cabs, real microphones, the real thing, just like 20 years ago. Because it inspires me a lot more, and it always sounds slightly different, and I'm trying more stuff. It's more fun. Whereas when I use, for example, the Kemper profiler that I love, sounds great, and I only use my own profiles, and I got a lot of them, but there's a certain tendency to just repeat myself, because I will just use the Kohlekeller Dietzel preset 3. It's going to sound great, like it did before. So probably I'm just gonna, go for it, And it might sound just the same like another. So it's, for me, the real thing inspires me to create something new.
A long time ago, it's a long time ago now, we had Amp Farm. Did you used Amp Farm right at the beginning?
No, because it was Pro Tools only.
Was it really?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
I
never
think
knew
so.
that.
Later, there was also a VST version.
Yeah.
But no, I never used any of those. I always used the real thing until the Kemper. I was the first one who ordered pre-ordered a Kemper. That was like blowing my mind.
Like German technology, I have to have it.
Yeah, but I was the first day I was checking. I was like, that's incredible. Because before I had like whatever IK Multimedia or Line 6 or some other company like modeling a rectifier into a 4x12 cab. The rectifier they had, and they were trying to do that, and then I was playing and things like that, but it kind of sounds different if I mic a rectifier, blah, blah, oh, that cab with blah blah. But now with the Kemper, I could, capture my own setup in seconds. That was just great. So before the Kemper, it was only analog. These days, I gotta say, we got some great sounding plugins, but I hardly use them. I got a lot of amps. I got a good sounding room, good sounding cabs, and it's pretty fast. It's all set up. It takes me 5 minutes, and I'm ready to go. You need that. I have an amp switcher, so I can just.
I know I'm gonna get. Which is the one you recommended?
KHE. From Switzerland. So I can switch between 4 cabs and 8 amps, just like this.
That'd be perfect for us.
So almost feels like working with plugins.
8 amps up there.
Yeah.
Probably just 4 cap. There you go. Yeah. Let's do it.
Amazing. And but I get it. I mean, there are people out there making awesome sounding records just with plugins, just digital, and I get it. Not everybody has the gear, has the money, has the room. So you can get great results with emulations. But to be honest, for some reason, I don't think tube amps are going away. If you talk to we just talked to Engel amps, we talked to a lot of Laney, right? To a lot of people, they all told us the last 2 years have been insane. Selling pedals, amps, cabs, speakers, everything. So people still buy the real thing.
Still want to be in a room with sound waves hitting you.
Right.
And it's all part of it,
Right. So
I don't know if I want to plug into a laptop and then maybe have a 412 coming out of my laptop. That doesn't feel good.
No. So I don't think tube amps are going away. Yes, more and more productions.
Sure.
Yeah. But then there are so many combinations. You can have a tube amp and a load box with IRs.
Yeah.
Then you have partly the real thing, but you don't need the room. That's what a lot of people do. Can be anywhere in between.
Yeah.
But analog is more fun for me. It's more inspiring for me. That's why I use it.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't really have anything to add. I will, I like to say dot the T's and cross the I's. Cross the I's. Bad joke. Anyway, I will say the reason I brought up Line 6 is because one of the best guitar sounds I heard was Dave Jordan and Brian Kohlstrom. They had just done Offspring Americana. And the guitars were absolutely massive on it. Not necessarily metal, but just really big punk rock guitars. Yeah. And I was in the studio. I was like, how are you doing this? And they're like, oh, you're still using, they pointed to the Saldanos and the Marshalls and all the great amps they had. Yeah. And even like they were using like Voxes and stuff. They were blending all these different amp signals together. And they're like, it's a combination of all these amps. And they had taken Line 6 amp farm and taken one of the heaviest things. I think it was the big hair metal. If anybody remembers that, which was just, I think it was like a Soldano, am I right, everybody? That just completely saturated and blended it in. And you muted it and unmuted it. And it was the difference. It glued all of the other sounds they would do together.
Probably because it sounded so different than anything that they could mic the real thing. Yeah.
And for what this person's asking the question, it was seemingly perfect. It was just like a wall of grah, and it glued all of these 3 amps or whatever the blend was that was sort of like, sometimes this was a bit middly and sometimes it just filled in all the gaps. Yeah. It wasn't the characteristic of the tone. It just reinforced it.
I mean, that's how you create walls of guitars, by like finding a basic tone that is great, and then trying to fill it up with whatever, and then that second tone you might add doesn't have to be great on its own.
Do you think like the 5150, the Uberschall, those kinds of amps, because Cameron's Uberschall and that amp, they have this thing where they're just like this block.
Yeah, massive.
It just feels like 20 hertz to 20K is completely
all
filled by guitar. Yeah, these more modern amps now have kind of achieved that, where maybe I don't know.
Yeah, of course you can get away with just using one of those amps, but most of the time, if it's metal and if you don't have a lot of other tracks, if it's basically rhythm guitars, bass, and drums, I prefer having 4 tracks. So a pair of guitar tracks with a sound like this, and then I always look for whatever is missing,
Right.
And that might be just, a tiny bit of or whatever, you know. There's always something to be improved, even with those amps. So and that's the fun of it. Like,
yeah, Dave would always take a D. He had baritones, but he didn't use a baritone. He used the D string on a bass guitar.
Ah, okay.
So, you know, so that would be a low D.
Yeah.
A D string on a bass guitar, and then he would take a wah pedal and just kind of go like this, and then distort that, and that was just like just this mid-range, and blend that back into the guitars. And that's the Alice in Chains guitar sound.
Stuff like that, you know, stuff like that. It's like, just makes it larger than life, you know.
And then you've done piano octaves, yeah?
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, piano octaves, low piano octaves to fill it in.
I've done that, and I've also done the higher bass playing, you know. Like doubling a guitar with a higher bass note, distorting it. Sounds a little bit like Lemmy if you do that. If you go into a
never
Marshall,
a bad thing.
No, so not a lot of low end, but a lot of grind, and get creative, blend stuff. That's how you.
I remember being 16 years old and trying to get the Motorhead guitar sound. Only to get old enough to realize it was the bass.
It wasn't only you. It wasn't only you.
You did as well?
Yeah.
I just
not me, but I've heard that story.
Different pedals.
Like back in the days, because I'm maybe a little too young for that. So so like for when Ace of Spades came out, I was 2. You know, big Motorhead fan though. I know every album, and I got all albums on vinyl, by the way. Don't know if I told you. Motorhead collector. But yeah, I heard that story, like people trying to sound.
Yeah, like, I didn't know that Ace of Spades.
There were no videos. It was just hearing, right, and it sounded like a guitar. So how should you know it's a bass?
Yeah, and it was through a Marshall.
Yeah.
So it's a Rickenbacker through a Marshall.
It's Rickenbacker through a super bass. Yeah.
Yeah, great, excellent. Thank you ever so much.
You're welcome.
That was some awesome guitar talk there. As far as guitar sounds and stuff like that, we touched on a lot.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. Actually, Christian did a studio tour of this studio. So
check out my channel very soon, maybe tomorrow.
Is yours coming out tomorrow as well?
Hopefully, if I'm fast enough.
This might come out at the same time, so we might link back to each other.
Yeah.
Look at that. So check down below. If not, regardless, go and check out Christian's channel if you haven't already. Have a marvelous time. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, tschüss, tot ziens, adios, ciao. Goodbye.